Welcome to a new series we are calling Lift Like a Girl, where I will teach you how to lift like a girl. When I say lift like a girl, I mean lift like a strong, capable female that enjoys lifting weights because you enjoy feeling strong and you enjoy seeing those body composition changes of increasing muscle, decreasing fat, building curves, all the good stuff that we know comes with lifting. I find for a lot of women that I work with, clients, friends, people that I just know within my circle, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of fear when it comes to lifting and it comes to strength training, specifically with the barbell. So my background is as a coach, I specialize in barbell lifts. I am a certified personal trainer, and I also hold the Hawaii state records for the squat, bench, and total for powerlifting. So I have had my fair share of experience with the barbell. And my goal is to try and get rid of some of that fear, some of that anxiety that comes with learning how to lift correctly, and give you cues and tips to be able to lift safely, effectively, and get super, super strong. Without further ado, today we are going to start off with our first lift of the series, and that is going to be the barbell back squat. So the barbell back squat is one of the most fundamental lifts. It is one of the big three lifts. So in powerlifting, which is my sport, that is one of the three lifts that you complete in a competition. But outside of powerlifting, outside of competition, the barbell back squat is just an excellent movement for literally anybody to do. It's a compound movement. It's working your entire body from your back to your core to your glutes to your legs. Everything is working to complete this lift. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of my best tips to make sure that you're lifting safely and you can continue to get really, really strong. All right, so before we even get into the lift, let's talk a little bit about what you're wearing. And I don't mean, looking super cute, although that's also important. I mean your footwear. So we're gonna talk about why it's important to lift with the proper shoes or to practice lifting barefoot. A lot of times I see people come into the gym wearing athletic shoes, wearing running shoes, where there's this really thick, chunky sole. And so they're comfortable in those shoes. Usually they provide a lot of support. They're comfortable to walk in, comfortable to run in. All of those are great things. But when it comes to lifting, we actually want to be focusing on as minimal shoes as possible. And what I actually have a lot of my clients do is take their shoes off entirely and go barefoot. So shoes, when we think about the shoes that we're wearing, the reason that's important is because that is our primary way to stabilize ourselves. That is our contact with the ground. And I like to use the analogy of tree roots going down into the ground. That's kind of what we want our feet to act as. And we want to use our feet and our toes to really grab the ground and be able to stabilize ourselves. If you're wearing a really thick, chunky shoe and you're kind of just floating above the ground, you're going to lose out on a lot of that stability and ground contact feel. So we want wide toe box, flat sole, minimal cushioning. That's going to be the ideal lifting shoe. All right, so now that we got the proper footwear on, or we're barefoot entirely, let's talk a little bit about the squat itself. So I like to break up the squat into three separate parts. So the first is going to be the setup, and this is probably the most important part of the lift, because if you mess this up, the rest of the lift is going to feel really, really hard. Then we're going to talk about the brace, and then lastly, we're going to talk about the lift itself. For the setup, there's a few things that are really, really important when it comes to performing a good barbell back squat. The first is going to be making sure that we're set up correctly on the rack. When we look at the rack, we want the barbell to be set up low enough for us to be able to wedge ourselves underneath, but not so low that we're having to do almost like a half rep or exert a lot of energy to just get the bar off the rack. So we kind of want this sweet spot. A good place to set the bar up and to kind of use as a gauge is our shoulder. So when we walk up to the bar, we want it to be below our shoulder. So if this was at my shoulder or higher, that's way too high. I'm gonna have to do a tippy toe to unrack it and then walk it back out, and it's really unstable. So I like to have it set up right below my shoulder. This is gonna allow me to get a really good wedge into that bar during the setup phase. Next thing is gonna be hand placement. So hand placement is gonna be dependent on you, your shoulder mobility, and just kind of what feels the most comfortable for you. For me, I use the bar to measure my width of my hands to make sure that I'm grabbing it evenly on both sides. This is really important because sometimes people have a tendency to grab closer on one side and then farther on the other, so that when you pick up the bar, it's uneven and then it feels really, really wonky. So we always want to make sure our grip is even. I use the lines on the barbell to line up my fingers. So this barbell has two lines here. I use the first line to measure my pinky. So I put my pinky right on the inside of that line, and then I grab and I wrap my thumb around, and then I get a really nice strong grip. Same thing on the other side. Pinky, grab, really strong grip. Once I've grabbed the bar, I do not let the bar go. This is another thing I see a lot of people do, is they'll grab it, and then as soon as they start getting under the bar, they'll start moving their hands all over the place. And you just defeated the purpose of grabbing the bar and measuring that position. So once you grab onto that bar, you should not let it go. So we're gonna grab onto it, and then we're gonna start pushing the bar into the rack. So once we kind of have started building up some tension through here with our grip alone, we're going to bring our head down, and we're going to walk into the bar and start sliding the bar onto our back and get this really nice wedge. I'm pushing myself up this way, and I'm sliding the bar down my back, and then I slowly come back down until it kind of pops right into place on the shelf of my shoulders across my rear delts. I push up, I snake down, and then it pops into place, and that's where I feel the most secure. So I'll show what that looks like. So I'm grabbing on, I'm gonna snake up, push myself up, push my chest up, get the bar wedged into my back, kind of squeeze my shoulder blades together. And then from here, I slowly start to lower the bar until I find that natural place on my rear delts where it kind of just pops right into place, and that feels super, super comfortable for me. My feet, hip width apart. So right underneath my hips, and I'm gonna pull my elbows in underneath the bar and pull my hips underneath and look straight ahead, okay? So this is where I'm at when I kind of start to wedge myself in. This is where I'm pulling myself in and wedging myself in before I straighten out my knees and stand up with the bar. So one more time, we're gonna snake under, push up, get that chest up, look straight ahead, bring my feet out hip width, slowly let that bar pull down till it pops into place across my rear delts, pull myself in, squeeze those scaps, get my knees and my hips underneath my body, and then straighten out those legs. All right, so that is step one, that is the setup. Step two, we're gonna talk about, which is equally as important. They're all important, but this is very, very important, similar to the setup, because without a good brace, the lift is gonna feel awful, it's gonna feel really, really heavy, and your chance of injury skyrockets. So let's talk first about what a brace even is, what the intent of it is. I know a lot of people throw it around, a lot of people talk about it, but I don't think people really fully understand why they're even trying to brace or why they're trying to breathe a certain way. So when it comes to lifting and when it comes to compound lifts like this, the primary reason that we want to be focusing on a brace is because we're trying to protect our spine. So our spine has all of these really deep intrinsic muscles that run along it and wrap around it to protect it from having load directly onto the spine. So there's like this just kind of really complex network of different muscles, different things that attach to the spine, and that we're able to recruit and to use to keep the spine extra stabilized and to protect it from injuries that could lead to things like herniated discs, bulges, things like that. So the brace is where we're learning how to recruit and turn on all of those deep core muscles and use them to our advantage to maintain a really, really tight setup, and to make sure that that spine is being protected. So the way I like to kind of describe a proper breathing and bracing technique is we want to imagine that we have an inner tube around the lower part of our stomach. So if you were to put your hands around the lower part of your stomach, we want to think about a 360 breath. So 360 meaning all the way around into our sides, into our back, into our stomach. And that breath is what's going to protect and stabilize the spine from all angles. And then we're going to hold that really, really tight and maintain that throughout the lift. So we're going to put our hands around our lower stomach, and then we're going to practice that 360 breath where we, and then hold it, brace like someone's going to come up and punch us in the stomach, and hold that, and then exhale. So again, 360 breath. Breathe into your sides, hold it, and exhale. So that breathing technique is what's going to help to activate all of those core muscles that surround the spine, instead of just trying to fill up the front of our stomach with air, or even worse, lifting through the rib cage and breathing into our chest. Because what happens when we start to do that is now all of the weight is gonna go to my back because I'm hyperextending, my ribs are lifting up, all of this is super, super loose, there's no engagement, versus if I'm breathing here, keeping my ribs stacked, keeping my pelvis in line, and then that's super stable. Everything there is gonna be able to protect my back. I like to practice it once I'm set up, what I just showed with the whole setup part of the lift. At that point, I'm already taking in my first 360 breath to brace. So I'm pulling myself in here and I'm bracing and then standing up with it so that when I pick up the bar, I'm already super secure. I'm not trying to like extend and lift up like this because that can already lead to some back pain. So we're gonna put together the setup and the brace, and then we're gonna walk out the bar. So grab onto the bar. We're gonna snake into it, push ourselves up against the bar, wedge ourselves in really nice and snug, squeeze those shoulder blades together behind us. We're gonna slowly come down, bring those feet hip width apart, slowly pull that bar right onto that shelf of our back, and then we're going to wedge ourselves in, pull those elbows down, get our hips underneath the bar, and then from here, we're gonna take that big 360 breath, brace, and stand up with it. And then from here, we're gonna practice our walkouts. All right, so now that we have set ourselves up, we've breathed and braced, we're gonna do what's called the walkout. So the walkout is a part of the actual movement that a lot of people kind of just breeze through. I don't think they think of it as an actual part of the squat, but it is, because once that bar is on your back and you're standing there with it, every movement that comes after that should be thought of as part of the rep. So what happens a lot with the walkout that I see is people just take way too many steps and they're not tight when they are doing that walkout. They're kind of already loosey-goosey with it because they're, again, not thinking about it as part of the actual rep itself. So as soon as we pick that bar up, as soon as we take that big 360 breath in, we pull ourselves into the bar and we stand up with it. You should think about that walkout as the first part of your rep, because a good walkout will make you successful in the actual squat itself. So what I like to do is I like to break it down into 3 steps. So I take one small step back, one small step out, and then I look down and I quickly adjust my feet to make sure they're even, and that's it. So a lot of times I'll see people pick up the bar, they'll take several steps back, they'll step way too big, they'll take really big steps. A lot of people will kind of just like walk all the way back here, and then they'll kind of shuffle their feet before they go. So every step that you take, I want you to think of it as like if you were to look at like a battery, you were to look at like your phone battery or something like that. Every step you take is gonna deplete your battery a little bit more, and it's gonna leak energy from your actual squat itself. So if you're trying to squat really big, if you're trying to get really strong, we wanna conserve as much energy as possible for the actual rep itself. So the best way to do that is to be really efficient with our walkout. So small step, quick glance, look at the feet, make sure they're even. And then from there, we're ready to do our actual rep. The foot placement and the steps that we're taking are gonna set us up for the proper squat positioning. So the reason I like to do one step back first and then one step out is because one, that's gonna help me clear the rack. If you notice that you hit the rack a lot when you're unracking the bar, it's probably because you're stepping out too quickly and you're shifting from side to side, versus if you take a small step back first and then a small step out, and then you set yourself up from there, and you're able to check your feet and make sure your feet are even, it's gonna put you in a much better position. We also wanna make sure our feet are even, because a lot of times people will unknowingly have one foot forward, one foot more back, one foot that's more turned in, internally rotated, one that's more externally rotated. So we always want our feet to be even. That's what's gonna help us with that grabbing the ground with our toes like we talked about, curling our toes up inside of our shoes, getting really, really stable, making contact with the ground before we do the actual squat. All right, so let's put all of that together up until that point, and then we will finish off with talking about the actual squat itself. Grab the bar, even distance, push into that rack. Start by snaking ourselves up underneath that bar. Start pushing into the bar, squeezing those shoulder blades together behind us. We're gonna slowly snake down till we feel it kind of pop into place on our shoulders. Bring those feet hip width apart. Pull ourselves in, so pull those shoulders and those elbows in. Get our hips underneath the bar. 360 breath into our stomach. Big brace. Stand up. Small step, Small step, check our feet, adjust, grab the ground with our toes. All right, and we are now ready to do the squat itself. So if you've made it this far in the video, you probably really care about having a good squat. So thank you for watching. And also, I do want to preface by saying that the actual squat itself is going to be highly personal to you and to your body positioning and to your anatomy. There's things that just work better for different people depending on the different proportions that you have with your body. So I can't tell you exactly the best way for you to be squatting, but I can give a generalization of a few different squatting techniques that you can try out, or if you have a similar body type to any of these different kind of anatomies, then you can try that one and see what works best for you. The first one I'm going to talk about is the stance that I use, because this is the one that I'm most familiar with. So if you can't tell, I'm very short and I have really short levers. I'm 4'11", so I have very short legs. I have a short torso. I have pretty proportionally short arms. I don't have anything that's excessively long or anything that's like unusually long in proportion to my body. I'm just kind of all around built pretty short with pretty short levers. So for me, I have really strong quads and I have pretty wide hips and pretty strong glutes. So for me, I'm going to be using more of a positioning that allows me to get into a bit of a wider stance with more external rotation through my hips, because this is what's going to help me to activate my quads, because my quads are pretty dominant. While also still being able to use my posterior chain and my glutes to really squeeze and keep everything nice and tight. So my foot placement looks like this. My foot placement looks like a little outside, hip width apart, toes are slightly externally rotated out about 45 degrees or a little less than 45 degrees. And then I'm in this position so that I can really squeeze my glutes, squeeze my quads, and kind of turn everything on. However, for any of you that are out there that maybe are tall or you have really long femurs, you're gonna probably want to practice more of a bit of a narrower stance. So not super, super narrow, but a little bit more narrow. So maybe more like shoulder width apart. And you're probably gonna have a little bit more forward lean because of your femurs. So for me, I can squat pretty upright. So I can keep my chest mostly upright and really just use my hips and my glutes and my quads to come down. But for anyone that's going to be taller, that's going to have longer femurs, you're probably going to have more of a forward lean to be able to get down to depth. So this is going to be, again, dependent on your anatomy and on your different proportions. So kind of see if you do a squat, just a regular body weight squat, and you find yourself having to have more of that forward lean and that feels more comfortable for you, then try that out with the barbell. The last one is going to be Olympic lifters. So if you're someone that's done Olympic lifting in the past, you've done CrossFit, you probably have a pretty narrow stance and a pretty forward toe angle where you're basically just about hip width apart and you're coming straight down and you have really good ankle mobility and you're able to kind of just get down into this position and come back up. And your body works more like a piston where it's kind of loading like a spring and coming down and driving back up. This is gonna put more torque onto your back, but if you are trained to do this, if again you have a background in Olympic lifting or in CrossFit, things like that, this might feel more comfortable for you depending on what areas of your body are stronger. So I recommend you figure that out. You kind of try a few different ways and see what feels good for you. So if we're talking about squat depth from a competition, so like I'm a powerlifter, so from a powerlifting competition lens, a squat that would get white lights would be a squat where your hip crease is lower than your knee crease. So see how my hip crease is here, my knee crease is here? This would be getting a white light in competition. This, where I am at parallel with my knee crease, this would be a red light. This would not count in a competition. This would not count in a competition because my hip crease is now higher than my knee crease. So if you're training for powerlifting specifically or for competition, you want to be practicing squats to a depth that you are below parallel. However, that's probably not most people. If you're watching this video, you're probably not a competitive powerlifter. You're probably just someone that wants to get a better squat. So what I like to use for clients is just getting just about two parallel. So just kind of getting right at that line. That's usually a good sweet spot for people. And the reason this is important is because the bottom of the squat is where we're gonna have the most glute activation. There's something in our muscles called a stretch reflex that when we get to that bottom position in our glutes will actually have a stretch reflex to kind of bounce us back up out of that hole. But if you're not going down to proper depth, you're not gonna get that stretch reflex. You're gonna be cutting off the movement, and it's actually gonna feel a lot harder and a lot less powerful versus if you come down to proper depth, you're gonna come right back up because you're gonna be using that stretch reflex in your glutes. Last thing that is probably not talked about enough is gonna be our back and being able to keep our upper body, because again, remember, this is a full body movement. It's not just our legs, our back, our core, our arms, everything is working with it. So once we get that set up where we pull ourselves into that bar, we wanna think about trying to squeeze our scaps together behind us and maintain that activation through our back the entire time while we're doing the reps. So what I see happen to a lot of people is they are kind of loosey-goosey up here. They come down for the squat and then they K forward, hips pop up, chest falls forward, and they end up doing almost like a good morning up where all of the pressure goes to the back. We're able to maintain that tightness in the back throughout the entire rep so that we can come down and let the hips and legs open up without the chest falling forward and maintain that tightness. All right, so the very last step to a good barbell back squat is the re-rack. So similar to the walkout, the re-rack is another part of the lift that I find a lot of people kind of just throw to the side. They don't really think about it as part of the rep itself, but it's again super important for injury prevention and also making sure that if you have people spotting you, that you're keeping your spotters safe as well. So the re-rack, we essentially just want to focus on getting ourselves, once we finish that rep, we want to lock out, we want to stand straight up with the bar, and then all we're going to do is walk straight forward until we hit the rack. You're going to hear it and you're going to feel it hit the rack, and then from there we're going to come down and rack it. So as long as you have set the rack height up correctly, you should naturally be able to just walk it back in, standing up nice and tall, and then bend your knees and it'll hook right into where you picked it up from. And then that's it. That's the end of the squat. You've officially done an entire rep. All right, so we're gonna grab onto our bar, make sure the grip is even. We're gonna push ourselves into the rack. We're gonna slowly snake our way up onto the bar, squeeze through those shoulder blades. We're gonna bring those feet hip width apart, pull that bar until we find that spot along our rear delts, and then we're gonna pull ourselves in, wedge those shoulders and those elbows down, squeeze through our glutes, punch those knees out, big 360 breath into the stomach, brace, stand up, small step, check our feet, adjust foot placement. All right, take another big 360 breath. Squeeze the toes, grab the ground, brace, hips and legs. Finish the rep, walk it back in, straight, hit the rack, and down. Thank you for joining me on this first episode of Lift Like a Girl. I hope that this inspires you to try the barbell back squat, to have fun with it, to find what works best for you. And if you have any questions, please hit us up, send us a message. Follow us on Instagram. That's where we're posting a lot of content like this. And if you're interested in a training program, please hit us up directly through email. You can email us team@itsmean.com. And I would love to work with you one-on-one. Be kind, train mean.